They thought she was just a sweet old lady misplaced beneath the stage lights, someone to bring a tear or two to the audience, and then quietly disappear. But when she opened her mouth to sing, every assumption, every backstage whisper, every patronizing glance dissolved into silence. Not because her voice was flawless, but because in every note was a lifetime never spoken aloud. Clara Monroe, 70 years old, living in the quiet town of Redding, California, where time moves slowly and dreams often fall asleep unnoticed. Once upon a time, she dreamed of becoming a singer. Big dream. The kind that made a 20-year-old girl leave home with handwritten sheet music and hope packed into her suitcase. But 50 years ago, one sentence from one man with power shattered it all. You sing well, but there's no fire, no soul. Her dream was crossed out in red ink, and Clara chose silence, chose family, chose sacrifice. Until one day inside her small-town church, she sang because no one else could. And someone not her recorded it, a blurry little video. But it reached millions, and Clara received a call from Hollywood. You would never guess that the quiet life behind this 70-year-old woman could stir the hearts of an entire nation with just a single song. If you've ever thought it's too late to chase something you once loved, if you've ever buried a piece of yourself because of someone else's judgment, then this story is for you. Reading, California isn't the kind of town that makes headlines. It's the kind of place where neighbors still wave from porches. The library smells like old paperbacks, and the same clerk has worked the bakery counter for 30 years. It's quiet, predictable, safe, and for Clara Monroe, that small town had become both her refuge and her quiet prison. She lived alone in a one-story house with faded blue shutters and wind chimes that sang soft lullabies in the evening breeze. Every morning, at 7:15 sharp, she made herself a cup of chamomile tea. At 10:00, she walked to the post office, whether she had mail or not. Thursdays were for the church choir. Fridays, the grocery store, always the same list. You see, Clara wasn't lonely, but she wasn't fully alive either. Once decades ago, she had another life in mind. She was 20, bright-eyed and brave, with a voice that made her high school music teacher cry. She auditioned for the Pacific Institute of Music in San Diego, traveling there by bus with nothing but a suitcase and a heart pounding with hope. But after singing just 16 bars of Summertime, the panel of judges nodded politely and dismissed her. The oldest one, Professor Davis, didn't even look up when he spoke. You sing cleanly, but there's no fire, no soul. We're looking for artists. That single sentence landed like a verdict, and it stayed with her for 50 years. She gave up on music that afternoon. She took the bus back home, packed away her sheet music, and enrolled in early childhood education instead. Then came marriage, motherhood, bills, loss, and the sound of her own voice, once so full of hope, faded into something she only used in the kitchen or in prayer. Sometimes the world doesn't need to take your dream away. All it takes is one sentence, and you learn to bury it yourself. But dreams don't die, not really, they sleep. And sometimes even after half a century, they stir. It was supposed to be just another Sunday. The pews at St. Andrew's Baptist Church in Redding were half filled, as they often were, mostly by familiar faces with soft hands folded over worn hymnals. The choir gathered as always, lining up in their burgundy robes, warming their voices on notes they'd sung 1,000 times before. Clara was there, standing in her usual spot, third row far left, near the stained glass window. She never sought the spotlight, never asked to lead. She liked blending in, supporting, harmonizing quietly just enough to feel part of something. But that morning, everything changed. The choir's soloist, a vibrant young woman named Kelsey, called in sick minutes before service began. There was a quiet panic backstage. Pastor Michael, with his brow furrowed, turned to the group and said, "Does anyone know the solo to 'His Eye is on the Sparrow'?" The choir looked around. Most avoided eye contact. Then Ruthie, Clara's longtime friend, softly placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "She knows it," Ruthie whispered. Clara's heart skipped. "Oh, no, no. I haven't sung solo in decades," she stammered, but something in the moment held her still. And moments later, without rehearsal, without a plan, Clara found herself standing alone at the front of the congregation, holding a microphone that felt heavy in her hands. The music began, simple piano chords, gentle and steady. Her voice trembled at first, But by the second verse, something shifted. It wasn't powerful in the traditional sense, but it was honest, lived in. Each note held a thread of grief-love time, a voice not trying to impress, but simply to mean something. What Clara didn't know was that a young woman in the third pew visiting family from Seattle had lifted her phone and hit record. She posted the clip later that night with a simple caption. This woman sang like the world had once broken her heart, and she forgave it anyway. The next morning, the video had 12,000 views. By Thursday, over 600,000. And a message appeared in Clara's email inbox from a television studio in Los Angeles. It's funny how the moment you stop trying to prove yourself is often the moment people finally begin to hear you. Sometimes the world just needs to be reminded what truth sounds like. Clara was rinsing out her teacup when the phone rang. Not the landline this time. It was her old flip phone, the one her daughter insisted she keep in case of emergencies. She picked it up, pressed the answer button carefully, and heard a voice too smooth to be local. Hello, is this Clara Monroe? Yes, we're speaking. This is Jennifer Lee, casting producer from American Dream Notes. We came across a video of you singing at church, and we were moved, truly. Clara blinked, unsure whether this was a prank. Jennifer continued. We'd love to invite you to perform on our upcoming live broadcast. All expenses covered. Just one song, one moment. America needs to hear your voice. For a second, Clara felt something flutter in her chest. But then just as quickly, something else settled in suspicion. You see, Clara had watched these shows before. The emotional montages, the surprise backstories, the elderly contestants edited between commercial breaks like feel-good footnotes. The kind of acts people loved and forgot about 5 minutes later. What if this wasn't an opportunity but a setup? A setup to be someone's awe moment, a viral clip, a sacrificial act to make the younger stars shine brighter. Not a woman, not a voice, just a strategy. And behind Jennifer's friendly tone, Clara could hear the edges of a script already written. We think your story would really resonate, she said. It's never too late to follow your dreams, right? It sounded rehearsed. That night, Clara sat on her porch with her shawl wrapped tight, listening to the wind. She wasn't angry, just uncertain. For 50 years, she had kept her voice tucked away, like an old keepsake. Was she ready to unwrap it in front of strangers with cameras? She thought about all the people who had heard her sing that Sunday morning, people who closed their eyes and listened, not with judgment, but with something closer to reverence. And then she thought, what if I could carry that same honesty into a place where it rarely exists? Maybe she could show them something real. Because here's the truth. Not every stage is a trap. Some are mirrors. And the question is, will you be brave enough to look into one? The next morning, Clara sat by the window with her favorite fountain pen in hand. She wasn't writing anything in particular, just drawing slow looping lines across an old notepad. It was something she used to do in college when words felt too big and too tangled. Letting the pen move was her way of untangling what her heart couldn't say out loud. That's when she saw the music box. It sat on the corner of the side table, dusty silver-plated and slightly tarnished. She hadn't opened it in years. Clara reached for it gently and lifted the lid. A soft tune floated out Moon River, the same melody she had once sung to herself before her very first recital, back when she still believed the world was waiting. It was 1969. She wore a pale green dress and kitten heels that made her feel older than she was. She stood center stage at the University of San Diego's student recital, Nightheart, pounding behind the mic. When she finished, there was polite applause, and then came the words that would follow her for decades. Professor Davis leaned forward, expression unreadable. Technically solid, he said. But you lack fire. You lack artistry. Some people are just support singers. That's not a bad thing. At the time, Clara nodded as if she understood. But something inside her folded up like a page no one would read again. She never performed solo after that. Instead, she packed away her sheet music, switched her major to education, and began a new chapter, one filled with lesson plans, sticky fingers, lullabies for her daughter, and soft humming while folding laundry. She had no regrets about becoming a mother, but there were missing pages in her story, pages where her voice was supposed to go. That night, she called Lily. Her daughter picked up right away. Hey, Mom, you're calling early. Everything okay? Clara hesitated. I got a call from a television show. They want me to sing. They saw the church video, I guess. They want to fly me to Los Angeles. Silence. Then, Wait America's Dream notes. Are you serious? Lily's voice was half excitement, half alarm. Yes, I don't know what to make of it. Another pause. Then Lily said, Are you going to go? Clara looked around her living room, the wedding photo. The framed picture of Lily in her cap and gown, the quiet that had settled in like dust. I don't know. I'm old honey. I'm not sure anyone wants to hear someone like me. Lily didn't hesitate. Mom, you once told me that life expands or shrinks in proportion to one's courage. Remember that Clara smiled softly. That's Ananias Nin, she said. And you're the one who taught me that. Quote. Sometimes we think the chapters are closed, but really they're just waiting for the right voice to finish them. Clara didn't sleep much that night. She kept thinking about the conversation with Lily, about the tone in her daughter's voice. It wasn't just surprise, it was something else. Recognition. Like Lily had just discovered a side of her mother that had always been hidden behind birthday cakes and report cards, and how was school today? The next morning, Clara sat with her phone in her lap for almost half an hour before calling again. Lily picked up right away. Hey Mom, you thinking more about the show? Clara hesitated. I'm leaning toward going, she said quietly. But I'm scared, not of singing, not even of the cameras. I'm scared of what they'll see when they look at me. What do you mean? I mean, what if they only see an old woman, a novelty act? A joke I don't want to be their moment of pity. I want to be real. On the other end, Lily grew quiet. Then she said, Can I show you something? Within minutes, Clara's email pinged. Lily had found the full church video. Not the version that went viral, but a longer cut with clearer audio and reactions from the crowd. Play it, Lily said. Clara pressed the space bar. There she was, standing alone in front of the choir, the microphone wobbling slightly in her grip, the first few lines shaky. But then her voice opened like a door being unlatched from inside. What caught Clara's breath wasn't her singing. It was the people in the pews. An elderly man in the third row quietly closed his eyes, tears slipping down his cheeks. A teenage girl clasped her hands in her lap, completely still. Even the pastor looked down humbled. That's what they saw, Lily said. Not age, not fear, truth. Clara wiped the corner of her eye with a tissue. I gave up a lot when your father passed, she said, and I don't regret it. Raising you was the greatest thing I've done. But I think I stopped letting myself want anything else after that. Lily's voice softened. And maybe now it's your turn, Mom. Maybe now. You let the world see the parts of you that I always wished I knew more of. Clara smiled gently, feeling something long buried loosen inside her chest. Sometimes the greatest gift a child can give a parent is permission. Permission to dream again. To reclaim a voice. To remember that there is still life beyond the sacrifices. It had been 19 years since Clara Monroe last stepped on a plane. The world had changed. The seats felt smaller. The flight attendants looked younger. But as the plane touched down at LAX, what Clara felt most was not fear. It was curiosity. Hollywood wasn't just a place, it was a myth. A city built on stories, dreams, and carefully curated illusions. And now, somehow her story had found its way into the mix. An assistant from the show met her at the terminal, holding a tablet with her name on it. Clara Monroe, the young woman asked, without looking up from her phone. That's me, Clara replied, trying to smile. On the ride to the hotel, the assistant scrolled through emails, barely speaking. Outside the window, palm trees blurred past glass towers and digital billboards flashing faces Clara didn't recognize. She wasn't offended. She understood. In a place like this time, only bowed for what was new. At the studio, the next morning, Clara was led down a long corridor of mirrors and makeup rooms. Everything shimmered. Everyone moved fast. There were dancers rehearsing in tight spaces, contestants doing vocal warm-ups, production staff shouting into headsets. It was dazzling and disorienting. She sat down in the corner of the makeup room, quietly waiting her turn. A stylist named Lexi approached her no older than Clara's granddaughter. She gave Clara a once-over and said with a polite practice tone, "We'll keep your look natural, a soft, grandmotherly glow, something the audience can connect with." Clara nodded, but inside, something sank. She was being packaged, wrapped in a moment. Not as an artist, not as a woman, but as an idea. An idea the show could use to tug at heartstrings, and then edit out before the finale. Later in the hallway, she overheard two junior producers whispering, "Every season needs one." A sweet older lady. Gives it that emotional bump. They weren't cruel. They were simply honest in the way people are when they assume no one's listening. And maybe that's the hardest part. Not when someone mocks you outright, but when you're looked at kindly and still not seen. Clara returned to her hotel room that evening, feeling the weight of it all. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened her notebook. At the top of a blank page, she wrote 3 words, "I am not." She stared at it, then added, "I am not a footnote. I am not a symbol. I am not done." She closed the notebook. Tomorrow would come, and she would walk into that studio, not as a side story, but as someone with a voice that had been waiting half a century to be heard. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is show up when no one expects you to matter. The morning of the performance arrived quietly. Clara sat alone in the studio's waiting lounge, the sounds of the production buzzing all around her, distant laughter heels tapping on tile cameras clicking into position. She wore her pale blue floral dress freshly ironed. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, resting on the lyrics to "The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face." She hadn't spoken much that day. No one had asked her to. Most of the other contestants were half her age, full of nervous energy and filtered confidence. And Clara, she was simply waiting for what she wasn't sure. Then came a voice, casual, unfiltered and bold. "You're the church lady, right?" Clara turned and saw a girl, maybe 22, with streaks of sapphire and lilac in her short cropped hair. A tiny silver ring glinted from her eyebrow. She plopped down beside Clara with the ease of someone who didn't care about protocol. "I'm Mia," the girl said, extending a hand. "I saw your video. Gave me chills." Clara smiled politely. "That was unexpected." Mia leaned back, eyeing the room. "You know they don't think you'll make it past tonight, right?" The words hit with a strange mix of honesty and kindness. Clara blinked. "Excuse me, I used to intern here," Mia explained. "Backstage crew last season. They always cast one older contestant, makes the episode feel warm, relatable, whatever. But behind the scenes, they already know who they're pushing forward." Clara's throat tightened. "So, I'm the warm, forgettable one." Mia shrugged, unapologetic. "That's what they think, but you've got something they don't." "What's that?" "You don't have anything to prove," Mia said. "You're not trying to be famous. You're not chasing lights. You're standing there with a story in your voice. And if you mean it, if you sing it like it's the last thing you'll ever say, no one's going to remember your age. They'll remember the feeling." Clara stared at the girl. For a moment, she saw her younger self, fearless, curious, unshaped by disappointment. Then Mia stood up, brushing imaginary dust off her jeans. "Don't sing for them," she said. "Sing for you. For the version of you who didn't get to." And with that, she walked away. Sometimes the deepest wisdom doesn't come from those older than you, but from those who still believe enough to say the hard thing out loud. Clara looked down at her trembling hands, and for the first time since she arrived in this city, they were still. Clara Monroe stood just beyond the edge of the curtain, one breath away from the brightest light she had seen in the half a lifetime. A production assistant tapped her gently on the arm. "You're up next, Ms. Monroe. Just follow the mark." Clara nodded steady now, not because she wasn't afraid, but because the fear no longer mattered. On stage, the host's voice rang out. Coming up now, a very special guest from Redding, California, a grandmother with a voice that touched millions online. Please welcome Clara Monroe. Polite applause echoed from the darkened audience. She stepped out. The stage lights hit her skin like soft fire. She blinked at the sea of people, unable to see any individual face. Only shadows, only silence. And yet somehow it felt familiar. A single microphone stood at center stage waiting. Clara walked slowly toward it. She could hear the camera crew shifting. Someone whispered to cue the piano. A judge scribbled something on a notepad. And then, nothing but music. The first notes of "The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face" floated into the air. Her fingers wrapped gently around the mic. She closed her eyes. Not to block out the crowd, but to see something else. Her husband Frank smiling in their living room as she sang to him barefoot on a Sunday afternoon. The hospital room, where she whispered melodies to Lily as a newborn. The empty kitchen she hummed in after he passed. The song poured out not with perfection, but with presence. Each word was lived. Each note was an unspoken page of a life that had waited too long. In the control room, a junior producer glanced at the monitor and stopped mid-sentence. "Turn up the audience cam," he whispered. Rows of people sat unmoving. A young man lowered his phone. An older couple held hands. One teenage girl wiped a tear from her cheek. Backstage, Mia watched through a monitor, her arms folded tightly. "She's not just singing," she murmured. "She's remembering." And Clara, without fully realizing, stepped forward slightly closer to the edge of the stage. Her arms opened as if reaching not for applause, but for someone long gone. "And the first time ever I laid with you." The final note held longer than expected. Not out of performance, but out of reverence. Then silence. A breathless kind of silence. 3 seconds, 5, 7. Then came the first sound, a single person standing, clapping, then another and another, until the entire auditorium was on its feet, erupting in applause. Cheers, whistles, a wave of recognition. Clara didn't cry, she didn't bow. She just stood there with soft eyes and a peaceful smile. Because this was not a performance. It was a homecoming. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is speak the truth they were once told no one would care to hear. The moment Clara stepped off stage, the noise followed her like a tidal wave. Thunderous applause still echoed from the auditorium, but here behind the curtain, the world was quieter, holding its breath. A young stagehand who earlier had barely looked her way, now stood frozen, his eyes glistening. I didn't expect that," he whispered. Neither did the producers. Ryan Matthews, one of the executive showrunners, the same man who had once referred to Clara as a touching interlude in the script, stood near the hallway, bouquet in hand and face unreadable. He approached slowly, the confidence in his stride replaced with something softer. "Mrs. Monroe," he said, voice low, "you did something tonight none of us were prepared for." Clara smiled gently. "I didn't come here to surprise you," she said. "I just came to tell the truth." Ryan nodded, swallowing hard. "We thought you'd be a moment people would tear up at. Something sweet, short, and forgettable. But the entire control room stopped working during your performance. Even our sound guy cried, and he's been with us 12 years. He handed her an envelope. 3 independent record labels reached out this morning. They saw the clip from rehearsal. They want to meet you, not just for your voice, but for your story, for your heart." Clara looked at the envelope but didn't open it. She didn't need to, not yet, not now. What mattered wasn't a contract. It was the stillness in the hallway, the change in the air, the way people looked at her now, not with amusement or indulgence, but with respect. Even the ones who hadn't believed in her, especially them, were seeing something new. Or maybe they were seeing something old that had finally been allowed to shine. Later that evening, as she sat in the quiet of her hotel room, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. The text read, "This is Professor Davis. I'm 92 now, living in Florida. I saw you tonight. I was wrong. So wrong. I told you once you lacked fire, but I saw it. I heard it. You've had it all along. I'm sorry." Clara read it once, then again, and a third time. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because sometimes the greatest form of justice is simply to rise while others are left rewriting the truth they once denied. The next morning, Los Angeles was still buzzing online. Clara Monroe's performance had aired the night before, and the internet hadn't stopped talking. America's grandma, the voice that brought silence, proof that it's never too late. Her performance clip had over 4.2 million views by sunrise. Comments flowed in from every corner of the country. "I'm 60 and just signed up for my first singing lesson. She reminded me of my mother, of everything I never said to her. That song healed something I didn't know was broken." Lily curled up on the hotel sofa with coffee in hand, scrolled through them all with tears in her eyes. "Mom, you've started something. This isn't just a performance, it's a permission slip for people to feel again." Clara smiled, not out of pride, but from a place deeper, a sense of wholeness. That evening, before leaving for the airport, she took one last quiet walk around the rooftop garden of the hotel. The LA skyline shimmered under the early evening light. She looked out and whispered not to the city, but to herself. It wasn't about being seen, it was about finally seeing myself. At the gate, just as they were about to board, an elderly woman approached. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, and she had soft, shaking hands. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Clara, the singer from TV?" Clara smiled. "Yes, that's me." The woman's voice trembled. I wanted to say thank you. I've been silent for a long time, but last night I started writing again. Letters to my children. I haven't spoken to them in years." She reached out and touched Clara's hand. "Your voice reminded me I still have one." And that was it. The true reward. Not the views, not the offers, but this one stranger, one quiet sentence, one soul unburied. Sometimes the ripple is the reward. When Clara returned to Reading, the town felt different not because it had changed, but because she had. She reopened the old music box, taught a few voice classes at the community center, sang in the choir again, not in the back row, but front and center. And once a week she sat at her window with tea and wrote songs, not for an audience, just for her. Because finally, after 50 years of silence, Clara Monroe knew she had never been too late. Some lights don't burn out, they just wait. And when the time comes, they don't flicker back, they shine. If Clara's story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, or share this video. You never know who might be waiting to hear something that reminds them it's not over. Not yet. We'll see you in the next story.